I let my daughter-in-law finish humiliating me in front of 23 relatives at Thanksgiving. Then I stood up, smiled, opened my banking app, and canceled the 5 payments that had been quietly keeping her luxury life from collapsing. The weight of the homemade pumpkin pie in my hands did a little to steady my nerves as I stood on my son's front porch. Through the glass panes of the front door, I could see the chaos inside relatives laughing, talking, and moving under the bright living room lights. For a split second, I seriously thought about turning around, driving back to my little apartment, and spending the evening alone. But right then, my son Julian spotted me through the window and rushed to open the door. "You made it, Mom," he said, forcing a smile. I stepped inside, and the rich aroma of roasted turkey immediately hit me. My daughter-in-law Vanessa sauntered over, took one look at my pie, and snatched it from my hands without so much as a "thank you." Her eyes instantly flicked down to my simple handbag. Vanessa was wearing a pricey designer dress and a gold watch that practically blinded you under the dining room lights. For 3 years now, she'd been bragging about her wildly successful online boutique. But I knew better. At the dinner table, everything seemed picture perfect until my niece asked me for some advice on high-yield savings accounts. Before I could even finish my first sentence, Vanessa cut me off, her voice ringing out across the entire room. "Oh, please, Evelyn, stop constantly asking everyone about money. It's getting really embarrassing for the rest of the family." A suffocating silence fell over the room. 23 pairs of eyes stared blankly at me. Julian looked down at his plate, flushed crimson, and didn't say a single word. Nobody defended me. In fact, looking around, I realized they all actually believed I was the one begging for financial handouts. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just offered a mild, polite smile, calmly stood up, and walked over to the coat closet. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Opening my banking app, I stared at the 5 recurring monthly transfers that drained my account every single month. Vanessa's luxury car lease, her private health insurance, and 3 separate credit card minimums. Over the last few years, I had quietly funneled over $60,000 into their lives just to keep my son's family from drowning. With 5 precise taps, I canceled every single automatic payment. There was no going back. As I slipped my coat on, a deep, unshakable wave of peace washed over me. The game was officially over. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen, sipping a cup of black coffee. The soft autumn light filtered through the blinds of my Boston apartment, casting long shadows across the table. Instead of my usual notepad, I had my laptop open. I fired up a blank Excel spreadsheet and began logging the data from the past 5 years. Every single wire transfer Vanessa had begged for as a short-term bridge loan was now laid bare in black and white. The final tally at the bottom of the column was unforgiving $62,400. Right on cue, my phone began to buzz on the counter. It was Vanessa. I declined the call and flipped the phone to silent. Over the next 2 hours, 15 more calls and a relentless flood of text messages poured in. The texts perfectly tracked the stages of her panic. First confusion, then impatience, and finally pure, unadulterated rage. "Why did the payments bounce? Call me back right now." The dealership just called me. I calmly finished my coffee, shut my laptop, and headed out for my usual Friday morning trip to the local farmer's market. Around 2 in the afternoon, my landline rang. When I picked up, I heard Julian's frantic, breathless voice. "Mom, Vanessa is completely hysterical. She says there's a major glitch with the bank accounts. Did you change something?" His voice was shaking. He was, as usual, completely overwhelmed. "I didn't change anything, Julian. I replied, my voice steady and firm. I simply stopped paying Vanessa's bills. She told the entire family last night that I was begging for money, so I just wanted to make sure I stopped embarrassing her. A heavy, agonizing silence fell over the line. I could practically hear the gears turning in Julian's head as reality finally caught up with him. "But Mom, you can't just do that," he stammered. "She has obligations. Payments are due." I felt zero guilt, only a crystal clear sense of boundaries. "She's a grown woman with a highly successful boutique." "Julian," I said dryly and hung up the phone. The peace and quiet in my apartment didn't last long. By Saturday morning, Julian showed up at my door unannounced. He looked pale, his hair messy and uncombed. Without saying a word, he walked in and sank into the kitchen chair he'd sat in since he was a boy. He stared down at his hands, unable to look me in the eye. "Vanessa has been crying for 24 hours straight," he began softly. "The repo men are coming for the car on Monday if the lease payment isn't wired. Mom, I don't get it. She always told me her business was booming." I sat down across from him, but I didn't offer him coffee. The days of coddling him were officially over. "Julian, your wife has been drowning in debt, and I have been quietly footing the bill for 5 years. I explained, keeping all emotion out of my voice. "I did it because I thought I was protecting you. But after she chose to humiliate me in front of the entire family, my charity is officially revoked." He swallowed hard. He knew I never lied. The hard facts were staring him right in the face. "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked helplessly. It was that same passive attitude he'd hidden behind for way too long. He was waiting for his mother to wave a magic wand and fix it. "I think you need to audit your wife's finances, Julian, and it's time you start looking at the truth." I stood up and walked over to open the front door. It was a clear, non-negotiable sign that our conversation was over. He got up slowly, visibly weighed down by the massive burden of a reality he had spent years ignoring. The moment he stepped out, I locked the deadbolt. I didn't feel any pain, just a growing sense of profound relief. For the first time since my husband passed away, I was living strictly by my own rules. Vanessa's house of cards was collapsing, and I wasn't going to hold up a single card. Sunday brought the predictable counterattack. Vanessa chose to use social media to try and control the narrative. A relative texted me a screenshot of her latest Instagram post. It was a black and white photo of her staring wistfully out a window, captioned, "It breaks my heart when family jealousy and bitter resentment tear a happy home apart." Praying for healing during this incredibly difficult trial. The comment section was already flooded with sympathy from aunts and cousins who had no clue what was actually going on. In the past, a post like that would have devastated me. I would have panicked, trying to explain myself or smooth things over. But this time, I didn't say a word. I simply printed out my Excel spreadsheet 3 times, slid the pages into 3 plain manila envelopes, and dropped them in the mail. No commentary, no angry notes, no defense, just the cold, hard numbers. Later that afternoon, my sister-in-law, Clara, the same woman who had given me dirty looks at Thanksgiving, called me up. "Evelyn, what on earth is going on? Vanessa is posting some really disturbing things online." I remained completely unbothered. "I just stopped financing Vanessa's luxury lifestyle, Clara. The receipts are actually on their way to the family elders right now, so everyone can see the data for themselves." Her tone shifted instantly, dropping the condescending curiosity for a sudden wave of panic. "Wait, what do you mean financing? Check your mailbox tomorrow morning. Have a great Sunday, Clara," I said and clicked end call. I went into my bedroom and started packing a bag. Now that my savings weren't being bled dry by Vanessa's shopping habits, I realized I had some disposable income. That very night, I booked a solo week-long trip to a bed and breakfast in Maine. It was time to start living my own life. At Quiet Revenge, we believe some of the strongest people are often the quietest ones. We share stories about family, betrayal, resilience, loss, and the strength people find when life tests them. While AI tools may help support certain parts of our creative process, every story is carefully selected, reviewed, edited, and produced by our team with great care and attention. Because our channel currently has limited monetization support from our community, helps us continue creating these stories. If Quiet Revenge has ever kept you company, touched your heart, or reminded you that strength can come quietly, please consider supporting us with the price of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family Co-Fi, https://co-fi.com/The Story Family PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/PayPal me/Kan Thank you for being part of this community. By Tuesday afternoon, the inevitable showdown happened. I was loading groceries into the trunk of my car when Vanessa practically materialized out of thin air in the supermarket parking lot. She had her oversized designer sunglasses on, but her body language was pure venom. She marched toward me, the heels of her expensive boots clicking sharply against the asphalt. "How dare you?" she hissed, stopping inches from me. She tried to keep her voice down to avoid a scene, but her face was distorted with rage. "You are completely destroying my reputation with the family. What is the meaning of those letters you sent out?" I calmly shut my trunk and looked her dead in the eye. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't afraid. "They're just my bank statements, Vanessa. Numbers don't lie. You told the whole family I was begging you for money. I simply provided the paperwork to show exactly which way the cash was actually flowing. You are a bitter, malicious old woman." She spat, her voice trembling. "Julian will never forgive you for this. We are supposed to be a family. Family doesn't mean allowing someone to steal from you and insult you to your face." I replied evenly, "If you want to talk about paying back the $62,400 you owe me, we can set up a payment plan. If not, we have absolutely nothing left to say to each other." She stared at me like she was looking at a total stranger. The soft, timid mother-in-law who swallowed every insult had left the building. Without waiting for her to reply, I got into the driver's seat, started the engine, and slowly pulled away. In my rearview mirror, I watched her standing alone in the parking lot, completely isolated out of options and stripped of her power because I refused to play into her drama. 2 days later, there was another knock at my door. It was late, almost 10 o'clock at night. When I opened it, Julian was standing there. This time, he wasn't just pale. His eyes were bloodshot from crying. He was holding one of the envelopes I had mailed out. It looked like his aunt had handed it right to him. "Is this real, Mom?" he asked, his voice cracking. $6,000 just for her credit cards and car every single year. He slumped onto the kitchen chair and buried his face in his hands. I finally went out and pulled the records for our joint accounts. She lied about everything. Our entire down payment savings for a house. It's just gone. I sat down next to him, but I didn't reach out to hold him. He needed to sit in this pain if he was ever going to grow up. "Yes, Julian, it's real. I thought I was protecting you by covering for her, but I see now that was a mistake. You have to handle this." She wants me to cash out my 401k to save her car, he whispered. She told me if I don't, she's packing her bags. And what are you going to do? I asked him bluntly. This was the fork in the road for his entire life. Julian looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw a spark of genuine resolve in his eyes. I'm not touching my retirement. If she wants to leave, she can leave. I can't live like this anymore. He stood up, gave me a tight, brief hug, and walked out. His footsteps down the stairs were heavy, but they sounded intentional. I locked the door and took a deep, clean breath. The purge had begun. It was going to be excruciatingly hard on my son, but it was the only way he was ever going to become his own man. My finances were secure, and my boundaries were set in stone. As the weeks turned into months, the entire family dynamic shifted. Vanessa tried hitting up other relatives for cash, but my letters had done their job perfectly. Nobody was willing to fund her lifestyle. Julian took total control of his paychecks and completely locked her out of his accounts. The luxury SUV was repossessed, and Vanessa was suddenly taking the city bus to a retail job she'd managed to find at a local department store, a far cry from her dreams of being a boutique mogul. One Saturday, Julian called me up. He sounded exhausted, but significantly grounded. Mom, Vanessa, and I started marriage counseling, and we're working with a financial planner to restructure our debt. Vanessa wants to talk to you. She wants to apologize. I thought about it for a beat. She can join me for a walk in the park this Sunday. But she is not allowed in my apartment. I kept the boundary firm. My home was my sanctuary now, and no one who had disrespected me was getting across that threshold. On Sunday, I met them both at the park entrance. Vanessa was wearing a basic winter coat. No designer bags, no flashy jewelry. She looked older, tired but more real. She kept her eyes glued to the pavement as we started walking. "I'm so sorry, Evelyn," she muttered as the cold wind rustled the bare trees. "I was incredibly arrogant, and I was cruel to you. I didn't slow my pace." I kept walking right alongside them. "I accept your apology, Vanessa, but words don't mean much to me anymore. Actions do. You will wire me $200 from your paycheck on the first of every month until the debt is cleared. It's going to take a very long time, but that is the only way we will ever build a bridge back to a relationship." She nodded silently. She knew she didn't have a single card left to play. The first week of the new year brought a pleasant surprise. When I logged into my online banking on the first business day of January, I saw a pending deposit, $200, memo payment. N.V. Cole. I stared at the screen and felt a quiet rush of satisfaction. It wasn't about the money. $200 didn't change my lifestyle one bit. It was about the principle. For the first time in her life, Vanessa was taking accountability for her actions. My trip to Maine was exactly what my soul needed. I spent my days walking along the rocky coastline and my evenings reading by the fireplace in my room. Not a single frantic phone call disrupted my peace. Julian called me just once to let me know they had officially moved into a much smaller, affordable 2-bedroom apartment. They had broken the lease on the massive rental house they never could afford in the first place. When I got back home, I invited Julian out to a quiet little diner in my neighborhood, just the two of us. He looked great. He'd lost some weight and seemed incredibly present. "How's work going, honey?" I asked. "Really well, Mom. I actually just got a promotion because I've finally been putting in the extra hours," he said, with a genuine smile. "And Vanessa is actually sticking to the budget. It's a huge adjustment for her, but the complaining has stopped." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I am so proud of you, Julian. You took the wheel." He looked at me with pure gratitude. In that moment, I realized my tough love hadn't just saved my own peace of mind, it had saved my son's marriage from an inevitable catastrophic crash. Sometimes the deepest form of love is the one that says no. By the time spring rolled around, the family wounds had begun to scab over. The initial shock and gossip had completely burned out. The relatives stopped taking sides because the paper trail was simply undeniable. Vanessa's $200 payments arrived like clockwork on the first of every month. I funneled every single cent into a separate savings account earmarked for Julian's future children if they ever chose to have them. I didn't touch a dime of it. For Easter, Julian and Vanessa invited the family over to their new apartment. It was a modest place in a working-class neighborhood, furnished with simple, practical IKEA furniture. I was the first to arrive. Vanessa opened the door, and this time she was wearing a simple kitchen apron. "Hi, Evelyn," she said politely, leaning in for a brief, respectful hug. "I'm so glad you could make it. I actually made a coffee cake using your recipe." Stepping inside, I could immediately tell the atmosphere had completely shifted. The suffocating pressure to look perfect had evaporated from their lives. Julian was in the kitchen, happily washing dishes. There were no expensive bottles of champagne on the counter, just regular coffee and a pitcher of water. During brunch, I sat back and watched the room. Vanessa served her guests attentively, completely stripped of the nasty, condescending attitude of the past. She had learned the hard way that respect isn't something you can buy with a credit card. I chatted with her naturally, but maintained enough distance to keep my boundaries intact. We weren't best friends, and we probably never would be. But we had negotiated a truce built on mutual respect. A full year after that infamous Thanksgiving dinner, I sat at my kitchen table once again. A pumpkin spice candle flickered in the center, filling my apartment with a warm, cozy scent. I held my journal in my lap, flipping back through the entries of the past 12 months. On my laptop, the Excel sheet was open. 12 consecutive lines were highlighted in green. The remaining balance was still massive, but the number didn't matter anymore. The process was what mattered. Tomorrow, I would drive back out to Julian and Vanessa's place for Thanksgiving. This year, I hadn't baked a single thing. Vanessa had explicitly asked me to come purely as a guest. She wanted to handle the whole dinner herself. I knew it would be a modest meal, but it would be real. No masks, no fraud, no secret bailouts. I closed my journal and felt an unshakable, profound sense of contentment fill my chest. My life was in perfect order. My cozy apartment was my castle, my retirement savings were secure, and my son had finally found his footing. I had learned that putting up walls isn't an act of cruelty. It's an act of self-preservation and real, authentic love. The numbers on my laptop screen glowed softly in the dim kitchen light. They had never lied to me, and they had helped me drag the truth out into the open. If you asked me today if I'd do it all over again, I wouldn't hesitate for a single second. I would delete those 5 automatic payments every single time. Because at the end of the day, a quiet mind and a peaceful heart are the only riches that actually matter. I turned off the light and looked forward to tomorrow. At Quiet Revenge, we believe some of the strongest people are often the quietest ones. We share stories about family, betrayal, resilience, loss, and the strength people find when life tests them. While AI tools may help support certain parts of our creative process, every story is carefully selected, reviewed, edited, and produced by our team with great care and attention. Because our channel currently has limited monetization support from our community, helps us continue creating these stories. If Quiet Revenge has ever kept you company, touched your heart, or reminded you that strength can come quietly, please consider supporting us with the price of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family. Ko-fi, https://ko-fi.com/The Story Family. PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/PayPal me/Kan Huangmin. Thank you for being part of this community.